last topic for discussion in this particular chapter of health and diseases is about nutrients. So what we are going to discuss in this particular portion is what is the meaning of nutrients, what do we mean by nutrition, and what are the different types of nutrients. So we'll discuss about all these different types of nutrients and their role in our body. So first of all, when we talk about the term nutrients and nutrition, what is the meaning of these two terms? So first of all, a nutrient can be defined as components that are needed by our body to grow, survive, and carry on different daily activities. Now, an interesting question that can come in your prelims examination could be about what are nutrients or what are the different types of nutrients. So I'm very sure that you know about fats, you know about proteins, you know about carbohydrates, you know about vitamins, and perhaps about minerals. But there are two components we actually miss out on. There are two more components which are also considered as nutrients, but normally we don't consider them. One is roughage or dietary roughage. We'll discuss what roughage is. And then there is another one which we never consider as a nutrient, and that is water. So if a question comes and there are all these things listed out, so just remember that there are 7 components of nutrients. Normally we consider only 5, we forget about the other 2. So that's why you have to consider that all these 7 are nutrients. Why are they nutrients? Understand this. When do we call something as a nutrient? If you have to take something externally and your body by itself is not capable of producing enough of it, then in that case it becomes a nutrient. That is, that let's say our body was able to get all the vitamins that were required by itself. It was able to synthesize all the vitamins by itself. Then in that case, vitamins will not be called as nutrients, because vitamins in sufficient amount are being produced by the body itself. But that doesn't happen. You need certain food, you go for certain vegetables and fruits to get the required amount of vitamins. So that's why vitamins are nutrients. Similarly, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, etc. There are multiple types of foods which will provide you these nutrients. So that's why these are called as nutrients, because you have to take its supply externally. And same goes for water as well. That water also is not present in the body in sufficient amount. You have to drink water from time to time. If you did not have to drink water and the body was able to make water by itself, then in that case we wouldn't call water as a nutrient. But since that doesn't happen, we have to call water also as a nutrient. So our food contains mainly 5 major types of nutrients, namely vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Additionally, food also contains water and dietary fibers or roughage, which are also required by our body. So that's why these 7 in total are all the nutrients. Now let's try to understand one by one all the nutrients. The first one is carbohydrates. Now when we talk about carbohydrates, and in today's world what you call as carbs. So if you have heard that if you have to cut out your fat, or if you want to lose weight, you have to cut out your carbs. So when the dietitian or the nutritionist or your gym trainer says that you have to cut down on carbs, they basically are talking about carbohydrates. So what are carbohydrates? First of all, they are required to provide energy to our body. Alright, they are required to provide energy to our body. So naturally occurring compound made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And when they break down, in their breaking down, they provide energy. By breaking down, they provide energy. So that's why the main function is to provide energy to the body, and it is found in our food in many forms, usually in form of sugar and starch. We see that there are 2 kinds of carbohydrates called as simple carbohydrate and complex carbohydrate. Simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. Common sources, I'm very sure that most of you are aware of, that bread, potatoes, milk, cookies, etc., everything can become sources of carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are energy giving food. So we require carbohydrates to provide energy to our body. But excess of carbohydrates leads to overweight or obesity. Why that happens, we'll have a discussion on that as well. So carbohydrates, there are two types, one which is simple carbohydrate and the second one which is complex carbohydrate. So simple carbohydrates are simple sugars containing single monosaccharide units. Now what is the meaning of monosaccharide units? Monosaccharide is the kind of carbohydrate which cannot be broken down further. All right, can't be broken down further hydrolysis, meaning that they will not be broken down further by chemical reactions with water. All right, so these are what monosaccharide units are. So these are simple sugars, that is they contain one molecule and they cannot be broken down into simpler sugars. All right, they are the simplest of the carbohydrates. So found in natural sources of food, remember this, that they are found in natural sources of food like milk, fruits, vegetables, etc. And they add certain sweetness to the food and they can raise the level of the blood glucose quickly, but are also very easy to break down. So that's why all these natural sources like fruits and vegetables, they are seen as good carbohydrates. So most of the times these simple carbohydrates are better form of carbohydrates. Then after this you have complex carbohydrates. Now in case of complex carbohydrates, you have them as polysaccharide units. Alright. So what is the meaning of polysaccharide units? They are made of many monosaccharide units. So that's why they can be broken down into simpler carbohydrates. They can be broken down into simpler carbohydrates. It will not be like the case of monosaccharides where they cannot be broken down further. So they can be broken down further. Now these are complex, meaning that they cannot be broken down easily. You have grains, wheat grain, white bread, kernel, cakes, etc. These are all sources of carbohydrates or complex carbohydrates. Now relatively they have less sweetness, but at the same time they are tougher to break down. So that's why these are the, you can say, the bad form of carbohydrates which can be avoided or should be avoided if in case there is a weight problem or a weight gain problem that has been observed in an individual. Now after this, the next kind of nutrient is protein. Now proteins basically are required for growth and development. They are required for growth and development. They are required for growth and development of our body. So proteins are also very important. The foods that have proteins in them, they are also called as bodybuilding foods. Why? Because they help in growth and development of the body. Now there are many food items which have proteins in them. For example, you have milk, you have pulses, you have eggs, meat, etc. All these have proteins in them. And as I said that they are all called as bodybuilding foods for this particular reason. They perform the essential function of helping our body to grow and repair itself. Now, proteins are something which are present in all the living organisms. For example, all the hormones are made of proteins. All the enzymes are made of proteins. DNA is made of proteins. So proteins are present in all the organisms in one form or the other. And these proteins are also very specific to an organism. That is the kind of protein that we need as humans. The same proteins may not be required by the plants. The same protein may not be required by other animals or other species. So that's why they are very specific to a given organism. So they are naturally occurring complex substances that consist of amino acid residues joined by peptide bonds. Alright, amino acids joined by peptide bonds. So just remember this, you don't need to go into the chemical formula of them. Just remember amino acids joined by peptide bonds. That's it. Now after proteins, the next nutrient is fats. Now again, fats are also responsible for providing energy. They are also required for providing energy to the body. So they have a similar function as compared to carbohydrates. But then, what is the difference? Why do the nutritionists tell you to cut the carbs and do not tell you to cut the fats? Of course, it is required that you will have to cut the fats as well. But why they specifically talk about carbohydrates has a very specific reason. Our body, until the time it has sufficient amount of carbohydrates, it does not use fats at all right? So fats will be always stored in our body as a reserve. They will not be used easily until the time there are sufficient amount of carbohydrates. But when our body does not have enough of carbohydrates, this is when the body starts to use the fat. So that's why if somebody is cutting down on carbohydrates, or popularly called as carbs today, if you cut down on your carbs, this is when the body will start to utilize the fats which are stored in the body. And that's why if there is excess fat in the body, and that's why if there is somebody who is overweight or is suffering from obesity, they have to cut down on carbohydrates so that the body will start using the fats, and this is when the fats of the body could be lost, and perhaps it will help in losing the weight. So this is why people will ask you to cut down on carbohydrates rather than cutting down on fats. Cutting down on fats is something anyway you have to do naturally, because higher amount of fats will bring in a lot of different kinds of issues. When we were discussing about having balanced diet in for preventing the non-communicable diseases, one of the reasons for non-communicable diseases to occur, like whether it is related to the heart or diabetes or anything else, in these cases we see that sugars and fats, they play a very major role. We had discussed about this. If you remember the facts that we discussed about non-communicable diseases, we had discussed that fats and sugars are the fourth highest killers as far as non-communicable diseases go. So that's why cutting down on the fats anyway is very very important. Not cutting down, but having a balanced amount of fat. And if you already have excess of it, you have to take measures so that they can be brought back to the normalcy. So fats provide more energy than carbohydrates. The body uses fats as fuel source. Fats are also essential for the absorption of vitamins A, D, E, and K. That's why these vitamins are also called as fat soluble vitamins. They are also called as fat soluble vitamins. Fat soluble vitamins. So butter, cheese, oil, etc. All these are examples of fat rich food. Now when we talk about fats, there are different types of fat, and there are some which are good for us, some which are harmful for us, which can be harmful for us. So first one is unsaturated fat. So unsaturated fats are the kinds of fats which are liquid at room temperature. All right, these are liquid at room temperature, and these are also called as good fats. These are also called as good fats. So if you have gone to a dietitian, if they ask you to have good fats, they basically what they want for you is that you have unsaturated fat and do not consume trans fat or saturated fat. We'll discuss about them as well. So predominantly they are found in foods from plants such as vegetable oils, nuts, and seeds. Then after that you have saturated fats. So saturated fats are mainly found in animal food. For example, red meat is a big source of saturated fat. But apart from that, there are few plant sources as well. For example, coconut oil, palm kernel oil. All these can actually add to the saturated fat in the body. And saturated fat is not considered good. This is the kind of fat which will be called as bad fat. Now, apart from that, there is another kind of fat which is called as trans fat. So trans fat are made by heating the liquid vegetable oils in the presence of hydrogen gas and a catalyst which is called as hydrogenation. This process is called as hydrogenation, and this is the worst kind of fat. This is the worst kind of fat, even worse than saturated fat. Saturated fat can be bad, but trans fat are very very bad for the body. And they are found in most of the deep fried stuff. So for example, if you look at this, all these things which are called as fast food, they are very very harmful most of the times, because they are the foods which are deep fried, which are also fried in the oil which has been used and reused multiple number of times. So if the same oil has been used multiple number of times, then in that case also the same oil can also start acting as trans fat. So if there is something that has been fried in that, then in that case they definitely will add to the trans fat in the body. So trans fat is the worst kind of fat among the three categories that we have seen. So usually saturated fat and trans fat are considered as unhealthy fats. So just remember this, that all these things which are, specifically most of these things which are deep fried, they are not good. Then after that we have vitamins. Now when we talk about vitamins, vitamins help in protecting our bodies against diseases. They also keep our eyes, gums, bones, teeth, etc. in good shape. Now, when it comes to vitamins, vitamins generally are also called as micronutrients. Alright, they are also called as micronutrients. There are two types of nutrients. One which is called as micronutrients, and the second one which are called as macronutrients. Now, micronutrients are the nutrients which are required in our body in small amounts. There are two important ones here. You have vitamins and minerals. They are called as micronutrients. Now, these are called as micronutrients because they are required in small amounts by our body. But on the other hand, when we talk about macronutrients, where you can consider fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, these are called as macronutrients mainly because they are required in larger quantities as compared to vitamins and minerals. So that's why in short form they are also called as micros and macros. So if somebody says that you have to keep your macros in check, it simply means that you have to keep your carbohydrates and fats in check. So micros and macros. Micros because they are required in smaller amounts, macros because they are required in larger amounts. So this is what micro and macronutrients are. Now, after this, let's look at the different types of vitamins. So there are two types of vitamins. One which is called as fat soluble. We had discussed this. These are types of vitamins which can dissolve in fats. You have vitamin A, D, E, and K. These are the ones which will be called as fat soluble vitamins. And then after that you have water soluble vitamins, the ones which are dissolved in water, like vitamin C, vitamin B1, vitamin B2, and vitamin B3. So all the vitamin B's basically they are water soluble. So vitamin C and vitamin B, these two are the ones which can be called as water soluble vitamins. So there are different food items which can give you vitamins, and this is a table that I want you all to remember. You can pause it here, the source of the vitamin, the function of a particular vitamin, and what kind of deficiency disease can happen if this vitamin is not present in your body. And this is one segment from there where multiple number of questions have come in the past, not only in your civil services examination, but just in case you are also writing your state level examinations, there also this has been one of the popular sections from where a lot of questions have come in the past. So you can just pause on the screen for once, look at this table, remember this table, because from here a lot of prelims questions have come in the past. Alright, same goes for this also. Everything from sources to functions to different deficiency diseases that can happen due to deficiency of a particular vitamin. So just pause here, look at and understand this table, and then move forward. Next we have minerals. So when we talk about minerals, minerals are used by the body to perform various functions like building strong bones, maintaining the heartbeat, making hormones, and for various other purposes as well. So there are five major minerals: calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. These are the ones which are required by our body in larger amounts. Although they are micronutrients, they are not really required in large amounts, but compared to others, they are required in large amounts. So there are so many of all these elements which are required by our body for one reason or the other, but the five major ones are these. So examples are leafy vegetables, fish, beans, etc. All these have minerals in them. So again, just like vitamins, have a look at this table as well. You can pause the screen for a while, have a look at it, understand this, and move on. Because from here again, we can expect questions to come in the prelims examination. After this, we have dietary fibers or roughage. Now, when we talk about dietary fibers or roughage, they do not do a specific function for us, Like for example, they do not provide energy or they do not help us fight diseases, but they are required. They are required for certain very important things. So first of all, it includes the parts of the plant foods your body cannot digest or absorb. So, but at the same time, they are important. So what are these functions? These functions are: first, they normalize bowel movement. They help in the entire process of digestion and excretion in a much better manner. They help maintain the bowel health. They lower the cholesterol level, and they also help in controlling blood sugar levels. So these are four major benefits that having roughage in our diet can have. So most of the leafy vegetables, they have a lot of roughage in them, a lot of dietary fiber in them. Many of the fruits and vegetables also, and you can say most of the fruits rather, they have dietary fibers in them. Then after that, finally, water. Now when we talk about water, they are required for digestion, for transportation, for dissolving nutrients, and also for thermoregulation. And at the same time, all the biochemical reactions in our body, they happen in the presence of water. And water basically acts as a universal solvent here. You might have heard this, that water is called as universal solvent. It's called as universal solvent. Why is it called as universal solvent? Mainly because there are a lot of compounds, there are a lot of chemicals which are very easily soluble in water. Right? A lot of such compounds. And what happens is that water has a definite shape. We don't need to go into the chemistry of it, but water has a definite shape which is like a bent shape. And because of this bent shape of water and distributed charges that we see on water, like for example, you might know water as H2O, right? You know water as H2O. So there are two hydrogen atoms and there is one oxygen. So what happens is that water maintains a bond between all these, but one of the hydrogen atoms has a small negative charge and the other one has a small positive charge. So because of this, there is an unbalance between the charges distribution in water molecule. So because of this, what happens is that because of this kind of shape, the bent shape and the charge distribution, this water is something that becomes universal solvent. This is called as a dipole. This is something which is called as a dipole. This kind of a structure is called as a dipole. And because of this, what happens is that water is able to dissolve all the polar solvents or all the polar solutes. All right. So all the polar substances will very easily be soluble in water. So that's why we see that a lot of substances across the arena are able to dissolve in water. Only the things which are non-polar, they will not be able to dissolve in water. For example, oil. Oil is non-polar. So that's why oil does not dissolve in water. So that's why certain kinds of vitamins also will not dissolve in water. They will dissolve in fats. So fats are that's why required for their digestion. Otherwise, water will help in digestion all across the things. So that's why water is required for digestion, transportation, dissolving nutrients, and also for thermoregulation. All these and all the biochemical reactions also occur in water, and water acts as a solvent or a base for all these kind of reactions to happen in our body. So water accounts for almost 50 to 80% of our body weight. Dehydration of as little as 2% of body weight results in impaired physiological responses and performance. So that's why water becomes very, very essential for the survival of an individual, and also helps in releasing waste from our body in the form of sweat and urine. So that's why water plays multiple roles in our body. That's why this also has to be considered as a part of the nutrients that are required by our body. So this brings us to the end of this chapter on health and diseases. We have discussed many types of non-communicable and communicable diseases. We discussed about drug resistance. We discussed about mental health. We discussed about different kinds of nutrients. So all these things, remember that most of the things that we have discussed in this particular chapter, they are important more from your prelims perspective than your mains perspective. There are only certain topics like drug resistance or mental health which are more important or can also be important for your mains examination. But apart from that, most of the other topics that we dealt with, they are important mainly from your prelims perspective. Remember, as we discussed, that this is one chapter which is not really mentioned in your syllabus as such, neither in your prelims nor in your main syllabus, but nevertheless this is a chapter that remains important in one form or the other. So that's why you need to understand and read this chapter well. Keep adding all the current affairs that you come across with regards to this chapter. It will be very helpful in your prelims and mains examination. So with this, we come to the end of this particular chapter. Thank you very much.